So we are going to be talking about teams today and the next lecture as well. But before we get to that, I would like to finish the debrief of the negotiation exercise we did on last class. So you recall that I had a table here where you had the buyer, the seller here, and the buyer, and you had the aspiration point and the reservation point. And we had essentially, typically, the seller is willing to pay to sell for $350 as their lowest price, and the buyer is willing to potentially go up to $2,500. And that's what we call the bargaining zone. So it's rational to have the price fall anywhere between those 2 points. Now, so a few principles in negotiation. So when you enter a negotiation where you negotiate, especially like a price or value, a numerical value, and you could think of qualitative negotiations, but you could assign a point system to to qualities, which allows you to quantify it, right? So for example, do you prefer to go to the Bahamas on vacation, or to Mexico, or to Canada, right? And you could put points in this, and that could allow you to negotiate with values, things that have qualitative aspects to them. But typically, often in negotiation, you have price is an element. So reservation point is the worst deal that you're willing to accept. So that means that beyond this point, you don't want to conclude the deal. You're walking away, right? Sometimes it's called the walk-away point. So if you're in a flea market, somebody's trying to sell you something, and I'll pay $5. They're like, no, I want 10. You might have a negotiation around the price, and then for you, it's like, well, I'm not willing to pay more than $8 for that, And beyond that, I'm walking away. So that's the walk-away point. So it's important before you enter a negotiation to think about what is your reservation point. So preparing, here's my lessons here. Preparing before a negotiation is key. Whatever you are negotiating, you want to research it on the internet, try to find the market value of it. The great example is buying used cars. I often buy used cars or motorcycles on Craigslist. And I often do a lot of research. So I start by looking at the NADA and the Blue Book value of the vehicle. That gives me an idea. That's the sort of experts that give you a value. But often it's not accurate. You have to look at comparisons of how easy it is to find that kind of vehicle, and how many you find at which prices, right? So you do a research. Typically, I will look in San Francisco, LA, anywhere between San Francisco and LA, because there's not a lot of choice in the Central Coast. So that's the first elements. Then you have to ask yourself, how much am I willing to pay? How much can I pay? And what's the maximum I'm willing to pay, right? So that's your reservation point. Then you want to try to have a better deal than that. So it's important to have an aspiration point that's better than your reservation point. When you and especially when you enter a negotiation, if you tell the other party your reservation point, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So you don't want to tell. So we've heard, it would have been helpful for the buyer to know this information and for the seller to know this information. Therefore, you should try to pry information from the other party and not give information. So if you have no idea what the other party, where they stand, it's a good idea to let them speak first, because they might give, the number they're going to put out there gives you an idea of where they stand. So in this exercise in particular, since you had such a wide range of potential prices, which, like for each party was surprised at how much the other party was willing to pay or how little they were willing to sell for, then it can be dangerous to, unless you're lucky. So let's say you're a very aggressive negotiator, and let's say you're the buyer, and you say, I'll pay $5 for that, teapot. That would be like, what? But if you do that, the other party might get offended and say, well, okay, so then we can't even have a deal. It's outside of the bargaining zone. So now, if you know the other party's reservation point and you make an offer at their reservation point or even close to it, that can be very effective. Making the first offer can be very effective. So let's say like you find a car you like on Craigslist. Somehow the seller has put their email there or their name, and you Google that name and you find their Facebook page. A little devious, but let's imagine you do that, right? I mean, imagine a bigger negotiation at a used car. You're a negotiator for a company. You're negotiating with another company. You will research that company. You will research what's happening for them, where they are, right? But let's say you find information that tells them, oh, that person is leaving the country in 3 weeks, and they have to sell their car before that, otherwise, or they won't have an opportunity to sell. So they are under a deadline. And furthermore, you see on their Facebook page, they say, I really need $3,000 now. And their car is advertised for $5,000. I don't know. Then you could say, okay, I'll buy this car for you for $3,000. That would be a good strategy. So that might be the reservation point. If you don't know your reservation point or the other party's reservation point, one technique that you can use to try to figure it out is called BATNA, Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreements. That's the acronym for it. The idea is if that person doesn't conclude this deal, if we don't conclude if we don't find an agreement, what's the next best option for the other person? Or if you're thinking about your BATNA, what's my next best option? So as an example, if I'm interviewing for jobs and nobody has made me a job offer, and I interview for a company and it's the only job offer I have, right? If they offer me a salary of $50,000, a starting salary of $50,000, what's my best alternative to that if I don't get that job? Zero, right? Nothing. I have no other job offers. So I'm not in a position of power. So that gives a lot of power to the company to get me for the best price they can. Now, if I have 2 job offers, one of them is offering $60,000, the other one $50,000. Now you can pit them with each other. You're like, well, I can't, $50,000. Sorry, I got another offer that's higher. So can you match that? Can you make it better? Can you offer me 65? So that's that if you already have a job and you're interviewing for another job, your current job is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So your salary and the salary is only one of the dimensions in a job. You have like prestige, opportunity to travel if you like that, opportunity for advancement, all kinds of other stuff, perks of different kinds. So you consider all of that as a package for when you compare different alternatives. So think about your BATNA, think about the other party's BATNA. That might give you a hint about the reservation points of the other party in the absence of information. We've sort of covered this. One sort of, you guys, how many of you have ever seen Inspector Columbo? Okay, so I think in Europe it was playing later than in the US. I think this generation has never seen it in the US. It's an old American TV series where you have this detective who's essentially playing dumb. He's always trying to get the criminal, so he's investigating a criminal, and he gets the criminal to give away information about themselves by playing dumb. So he has like this kind of like dirty raincoat, and he's coming around, and he's like, I'm kind of stupid, let me understand like this, So that's a kind of good technique to pry information from the other party, asking innocuous questions. Example, you're the buyer. You could come in and, here's the seller. Hey, hi, how are you? How's business today? That could be like a nice introduction to like, seems to be innocuous, but what I'm doing is fishing for information. Now, you know, if you might give away like, a little slow today, business slow, you know. Yeah, I noticed you know, there's not a lot of people here. It's the summer. Slow is kind of like empty, you know. Yeah, it's like really hard. So that already gives me an idea of where they stand, how desperate they are. You know. I have a friend who was telling me about for buying new cars, salesmen have quotas they need to fill. So by the end of the month, if they haven't filled them, they're really eager to fill them, and that's a really good time to buy a car at a good price. So you know, if you go and you know, of course, car salesmen are very good at negotiation, so you have to have your game on. But you know, like because they will, on the other hand, they will do that game all of the time. How many of you have had salespeople who come and ask you questions, like, "Hey, I see you're interested in this car," you know? "Oh yeah, I've been wanting this car forever. I love this." They're like, "Oh, okay," like you know. So that's why, you know, it's kind of like having the poker face, or you're not giving away too much information, pretending that you're not really interested in something. Like, yeah, I don't know, like this is your dream car. Like, yeah, I don't know, yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm looking around, you know. That's kind of like, it's devious, but now, you know, on the other hand, ask questions, innocuous questions that invite the other person to elaborate, to blurt out information. Yeah, we've talked about the sort of the notion of anchoring in negotiation is when no price has been named yet, the first person who names a price, that price tends to anchor the negotiation. So meaning that from that point on, you're going to negotiate from that point. So you know, like if there's a wide bargaining zone like this, you know, if the first person says 2,000, you know, that's going to be around 2,000. But if the first person says 400, it's going to be around that. So you can see the double-edged power. If I'm the buyer and the seller asks me how much are you willing to pay, and I blurt out inadvertently 2,000, then I've shot myself in the foot because I don't know how cheap I could get the thing on. Right? Now you were all given an estimate of the value of the vase, which was 400 to 1,200. So you could pick the most favorable ends of that continuum to make an offer. You could say like if you're the buyer, 400, right? That could be a technique. But so one more time, if you know the other party's reservation point and you can make an offer at this point, then that's a great deal for you. So, you know, in the future, when you buy a used car, when you buy a new car, when you get a job, when you work at a company and negotiate with people for various things, suppliers, remember that, you know. If you're interested in knowing more, you can take an elective in negotiation. There's many, many more techniques that can be used, you know, including when you're negotiating for a coalition of other people, where you have, different kinds of negotiation. So prepare, figure out the dimensions of the deal, think about your preferences, think about your BATNA, figure out your reservation points, try to guess the other party's reservation points, ask innocuous questions to pry information, hide your own feelings about something, especially if you're really excited about things. Don't ever show you're desperate. Don't ever show you. Here's an interesting thing. A question that people ask me is it okay to lie? And I would say, I don't condone lying, but you can have white lies, meaning like you can not answer. So like let's say an employer asks you, but sometimes they do, like at the end of Cal Poly, you're going for a job. Do you have, what other job offers do you have? And you have no other job offers. How do you respond to that? I would respond like, oh yeah, I'm definitely in the process of like, even if you don't have interviews scheduled, you can say like, I'm in the process of talking with a number of companies right now. You can say like, send in resumes, having LinkedIn things, that could be considered like, being, connecting, or you could use the term connecting with a number of companies, I mean, you can always, so that's, I think of it, that's an acceptable lie. That sort of like shows that you're not, if they were going to really press you and say, okay, what offers do you have? then I would say, oh, I don't have offers yet, but I'm working on it, So, but that's sort of a white light. Now, one caveat. So, this type of negotiation invites you to be very competitive, very. You remember the different styles that we talked about. Oops. Here, the different conflict handling styles. The competing style is very successful, is the most successful style in the sugar bowl negotiation. Not the compromising and collaborating style, right? And that's kind of the used car salesman scenario. The used car salesman is not your friend, He wants your money, and he wants to get as much money from you as he can and sell you the worst possible car, that's on the lot. So that's mainly the game, So, which is why I don't buy used cars on used car lots, and on Craigslist instead. But so competing is the game there. Now I had another exercise which we didn't have time to do to show you another kind of negotiation. It was called the ugly orange, where we're not going to do it, but I'm going to summarize the idea. So each of you would, I know it's a kind of a trick, because I prepare you for this kind of negotiation, and then I make you fail on the next type of negotiation to show you that there's different kinds. So in this type, you have two researchers who both are competing to get a very rare kind of orange called the ugly orange. And they both need it for very, very important causes. One of them needs it for a vaccine that's going to help cure an illness that's going to, a horrible illness that's, appearing somewhere in some region of the US. The other one needs it to neutralize a nerve gas from a Second World War bomb that has just started leaking in Los Angeles area, and it's going to kill a bunch of people. So they both need the entire supply of oranges that has been produced by one producer. It's 7,000 oranges. And they both give it a $250,000 budget, to get them. So logically, if you follow the logic of this kind of logic, you're going to have a bidding war between the two of them, and they're not going to have an agreement. But in fact, the catch is that one of them needs only the rinds or the peel of the oranges, and the other one needs the juice of the oranges. So in fact, they could collaborate and both have a win-win, right? They could not have a bidding war. They could buy together the oranges at market price. One of them takes the peel, the other one takes the juice, right? So that's just to show that there's two types of negotiations. There's distributive negotiations, which are characterized as win-lose, where the two parties are opposed. And the prototypical example of that is the used car salesman transaction. Or you can think of it as a stock market transaction. Like, transaction with an anonymous person. On the stock market, you're not trying to be nice to anybody, you're trying to get the best price you can. That's the game. But you have other kinds of negotiation that are integrative. So typically, when you have repeated interaction with the same party, let's say your partner, or your romantic partner, you might have different moments where you want different things. You're not trying to always win over your partner, because that's not that's not how relationships work. And furthermore, the other person eventually is going to start retaliating if you don't give them a fair deal. But that's true in business. If you keep having the same repeat business with a supplier, for example, or with a client, you realize you have to give them a fair deal. You have to let everybody have some win-win. Otherwise, the client is not going to give you their business anymore. So integrative negotiations are where there's a potential for win-win. So I explain, I can't summarize all the dimensions that make a negotiation more integrative or more distributive, but Repeated interaction is one of them. The structure of the what's negotiated, like the example of the peel versus the juice. How much of a win-win is it possible to have? So, I was mentioning earlier, in certain games, like competitive sports, like tennis, soccer, football, the game is designed to be win-lose. You can't really have a win-win. One party has to win, the other one has to lose. You could say, well, there's such a thing as fair play. Okay, so there's fair play, which adds a little bit of integrative dimension to that. But you can restructure things as could we change this and make it a win-win? And I had given you the example of the couple that wants to see a different movie, romantic comedy versus adventure, and then they inquire into why do we want that, and then they find a way to have a win-win by changing what is it that they're negotiating for. Life is, this gives you the idea that life is black or white. And as you know, life is not black or white, it's gray. So it's not as if there's some negotiation are distributive and other integrative. It's you have more or less integrative potential in a given negotiation. So that's a way to think about it. How much integrative potential is there in this negotiation?